Johns Hopkins newsletter that is mostly doing COVID updates every week, and it does sort of counts both cases and deaths across the world, and then talks about some of what's going on regionally. And in Oceania, here you can show now, Zach, just the top paragraph, Australia and New Zealand have both demonstrated, this is from this week, the 5th, I wanted to say the 15th, but it's not the, yeah, I think it was from yesterday, the 15th. Australia and New Zealand have both demonstrated the ability to effectively contain their respective COVID-19 epidemics. Considering their success in limiting transmission, both countries are reportedly delaying their vaccination campaigns until mid to late February. This extra time will allow health and regulatory officials to gather more information on the efficacy and safety of the various SARS-CoV-2 vaccines and vaccine candidates. Additionally, the delay will provide both countries an opportunity to better prepare their distribution plans. I think this makes the governments of Australia and New Zealand fascists, or at least anti-vaxxers, does it not?
Interesting question. To me, it makes them sound quite reasonable.
Quite reasonable. Like they have actually done a good job on the front end, unlike, for instance, the United States, of controlling transmission. And as a result, they have a little bit more leeway to say, you know what, let us hold off because these vaccines are brand new. And no matter how safe you say they are, we simply cannot know. That is something that apparently is what Australia and New Zealand have said, and they're allowed to do that. So should the rest of us be allowed to have those conversations and have those questions.
We should be allowed to have those conversations. Of course, we're in a different, as you point out, we're in a different circumstance because the control has been poor, to say the least.
To say the least, yep.
So, which actually brings us to the second to last thing, which is, Zach, would you put up the New York Times article I sent you on the COVID vaccine death? So I wanted to point something out here, and I want to be very careful that people don't overinterpret it. This is a news report of a death that looks very much like it was caused by the Pfizer vaccine. And I don't say that casually. In this article, an expert who was not involved in the case says that basically it's hard to avoid the impression that this was a direct causal link between this doctor's death and the vaccine that he had gotten 16 days earlier. Now, okay, so this is a doctor who has died apparently from the vaccine. Now, in and of itself, I don't think that necessarily means anything. Many people are dying from COVID. We should expect there to be a certain number of strong reactions. People's physiology varies quite a bit. And so in and of it,
every medicine should be expected to have some extreme adverse effects on hopefully a tiny, tiny, tiny minority of people who are receiving that medication. That, a number, an anecdote doesn't say anything about frequency or, risk to others.
And in fact, Zach, would you put up the COVID vaccine tracker site that I sent you? Nope. There it is. So we have, numbers that this death should be put in the context of. So we have almost 38 million doses have been distributed in 49 countries. 2.41 million doses per day in the United States. We've got 13 million shots, almost 1 million doses are administered per day. So these are very large numbers, and one person's death, is certainly shocking and should give us pause, but it's not, in comparison to those numbers, it is not reason to panic.
So
however,
you're not bringing it up for that reason.
Right. I'm not bringing it up for that reason. But if you'll go back to the news report, and if you could enlarge it a little bit, and scroll down. Okay, so here it is. Shortly after receiving the vaccine, Dr. Michael developed an extremely serious form of a condition known as acute immune thrombocytopenia, which prevented his blood from clotting. Effectively, this is a new disease to me, but my understanding is that it is effectively the immune system attacking a component of the blood clotting. The blood clotting is a very complex phenomenon that involves a cascade of things, platelets being the beginning of the cascade where platelets are broken open, spilling out chemicals that trigger this cascade that results in clotting. So effectively, some catastrophic failure of his clotting ability ensued in the aftermath of his getting the vaccine, and ultimately he died of it. But the reason I raise it is because when we were talking about these new mRNA vaccines, and the Pfizer vaccine is one of the newfangled mRNA vaccines.
2 or 3 episodes ago.
2 or 3 episodes ago, we were talking about what we don't know. Now, what we don't know is anything at all about the long-term effects of these vaccines, because there hasn't been a long period of time since anybody has had them. And so whether or not they turn out to do any harm of a long-term nature, we have no idea. But is the possibility there? Yes, it's there. Not only because these vaccines haven't been tested in anyone over a long period of time, but because they are on a new platform, and therefore possibilities that we could rule out on the basis that we've never seen X, Y, or Z platform do that before, we can't rule out here because these things are truly novel.
Or at least have much higher certainty that it wouldn't be happening.
Right. So what I do want to point out is that in talking about what could be downstream, and in my opinion, virtually anything could be downstream long term, we don't know what it means. And the fact is there's enough novel about these vaccines that and we're talking about a complex system, the human body. We really don't know what's going on. But one possibility is that a vaccine like this could interact with the immune system and cause an autoimmune disorder, right? That would be a big, frightening problem. Now, this is one death, but that is an autoimmune disorder. And so my point is just simply proof of concept. Can these vaccines cause an autoimmune reaction up through the level of being fatal? Apparently.
Right. I mean, of course, Pfizer is saying it's not connected.
Well, Pfizer is doing what it has done from the beginning, which is effectively using careful scientific language to suggest safety. In other words, yes, we cannot establish anything on the basis of one death, even if it's conspicuous, the connection. And so what I would say is we don't know. It is also the case that this very same disorder can be caused by COVID itself. Now, the cases, I believe, all of the cases that have been witnessed, and it's not a huge number, but all of the cases of this disorder that have been seen following people contracting COVID have not been fatal. Some of them have been serious. But in any case, we are dealing with a complex system. The immune system is built to deal with anything novel that it runs into. And so this is an obvious possibility, and it's something that we need to track. We need to be thinking about what the long-term dangers are here. And the example of Oceania deciding to wait a little while and see what turns up is wise, especially if you've done the front end part right. You've not allowed this to get politicized, and you've deployed good policy. You can afford to wait.
Yeah, good for them. They had an easier time than a lot of countries because they're the opposite of landlocked, right? Because they have entirely water borders. Of course, the U.S. does not have entirely water borders, but it is should have had an easier time than, say, some of the countries in Europe, although the sheer size and scope of the United States makes things more difficult.
Yeah, well, if you'll think back to the early part of the epidemic, there was talk about effectively preventing people from crossing our borders, and it was treated as xenophobic.
Yeah, well, and at this point, our American passport has never been worth so little as it is right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.